How do you choose a property manager? I think most landlords approach this very much on what are your fees and whether they like and trust the person. Now, don't get me wrong, you need to be able to like and trust the person you're working with, because all going well, you'll be working with them for a long period of time. But the fee question is one that, while it needs to be considered, is probably the least important question you need to be asking. So I have statistics that show that property management fees is the number one Googled search term. I think the challenge with this is that landlords don't know what to ask. So it's kind of like when you go to the accountant, you're not a tax expert. So you ask the questions that you believe are relevant, but you don't know what you don't know. So the purpose of this video is to perhaps show landlords that there are a lot of other questions you can be asking and should be asking of the person who is looking after your biggest asset. Now, in terms of fees, it's never just about the fees. Obviously, this is an investment, so we want to look at the numbers, but price is what you pay, value is what you get. So the biggest question I get asked is, what is your management fee? And the fact is, this is just a very small portion of what fees are generally charged around the country. There are other fees involved as well, but everyone focuses on the management fee because it's one number. And these can range dramatically around the country, with some states on the lower side and other states on the higher side. But let's say, for example, standard in your area is 8%. And a lot of landlords will try and get that to, say, 7%. For most properties, the difference between 7 and 8 is really nominal. When you discount one management fee down 1%, it can have big reaching effects for the agency, but for the landlord, it's a cup of coffee. That's the difference that we're usually arguing about. Management fee is only a small part of the fees that you can be charged as a landlord. So in most agencies, you'll have a management fee, which is collected on rent. Then you'll have other miscellaneous fees, such as a letting fee, a renewal fee. You might have an admin fee. You might have a statement fee or a routine inspection fee. There's all sorts of different fees that are charged in conjunction with the management fee. So you've got the management fee that will be consistent because rent will be consistent. The other fees are only going to be applicable as and when things happen within your tenancy. So a letting fee is payable at the start of the tenancy. And that's where the fees will fluctuate depending on what's happening in the tenancy. So focusing just on management fees is really probably a mistake, because there are other things that can quickly eat into your annual revenue, such as a letting fee. The cost of the letting fee is high because there is a lot of work involved in commencement of the tenancy. But let's say your tenant moves in, 3 months later, they break their lease. You're up for another letting fee, which can have a significant effect on your annual revenue. Yes, the tenant is liable for some of those in most states, but understanding how the other fees work is really critical as well. However, reminding you that it's not just about the fees. There are many other questions you should be asking. So in most agencies, you'll either have what we call end-to-end, or you might have a pod system. So end-to-end is what most people will be familiar with. End-to-end is what most people will be familiar with. And then the pod system might look like a mix of different things. So you might have a senior property manager. You might have a leasing manager. So the leasing manager will be responsible for letting out the properties. You might have a routine inspection manager. You might have a trust account manager. So there's different people that focus purely on tasks, whereas your end-to-end property manager does everything from the moment the tenant moves in to the moment they move out, and you have that one point of contact. So there are pros and cons to both, but understanding how you work and what would work for you is definitely one of those things that you need to look into when speaking to real estate agents. In terms of the actual business itself, you want to have a think about the size of the business, because you want to understand how they operate, because when things go wrong, if you know what's coming, you're better equipped to deal with it. Let's say, for example, your property manager is sick. Things happen. We know that, right? What is the business's backup plan if that property manager is off sick or if they take holidays? What does that look like? So understanding if your property manager goes on holidays, are you communicated about that in advance? Like, what is the business's process? This helps set expectations for you so that you're not disappointed. Also, you're clear on what it looks like when things change. Understanding too, it's very similar to a job interview. Like, I would want to know what experience the property manager has, or what experience does the leasing manager have? Leasing manager roles and inspection manager roles typically are junior roles. It's an entry-level position. But if these tasks are not completed correctly, it can be damaging for your property and it can have some poor consequences. So understanding the experience of the agency you are working with is another good thing to think about. And who will you be speaking to on a consistent basis? If you are opting for an agency that operates the pod system, understanding who you can call when there are multiple people involved in that team will definitely make things smoother for everyone. When it comes time to lease your property, so let's say you have an empty property, understanding how the agency works can be really beneficial because we all work in a different way. So do they do open inspections, and how many will they do? Do they only show the property by appointment? Do they ask the tenant to apply beforehand? One thing that I do recommend, if you can, if you are considering an agency and it's possible for you to view a property that they are currently managing and have available for rent, and you can go have a look at it, quote unquote, as a tenant and see the property manager live and in action, this is going to be really telling. Either it will confirm to you that they're the right agency, or it will confirm to you that perhaps they're not the right agency to work with. But seeing them in action, we can all say that we're great, but actually seeing this for yourself is a really good trick. Understanding who is checking the applications. Is that done offshore, which can be the case sometimes? What is their process around ensuring that the applications are checked thoroughly and accurately? And is there a final sign-off on someone perhaps more senior before those applications are presented to you as a landlord? Definitely understanding the process and how you will be communicated with while the property is on the market, because it can be a stressful time. Another question that I would consider asking is whether they would make any suggestions to better present the property. What is their marketing strategy? These are all really useful questions to ask when you are looking for a tenant if you're starting out the relationship with an empty property. If you are starting the relationship with this agency and your property is already tenanted, perhaps it's with another agency, I would be asking what that agent is going to do for your tenant. How are they going to smooth over that process? What is their process? And then understanding how soon will they go have a look at the property. So something to keep in mind, because changing agencies should be a straightforward process, but for your tenant, it can be disruptive. So understanding how that agent works is another useful thing to think about if your property is already tenanted. Condition reports, they're called different things all around the country, but essentially this is the report that your property manager will complete before your tenant moves in. It's a critical piece of evidence when your tenant vacates to ensure that if there are damages or cleaning, you have valid evidence in order to make a claim. I have, across the years, seen situations where the entry condition report wasn't done at all, exposing the landlord to not being able to claim for anything. And so some things that I would want to understand is certainly their process, whether you can have a look at an example report. And I would also be asking if you get a copy of that report as the landlord, because this document is so critical to the success of the overall tenancy in reducing your risk when the tenant vacates to ensure that you get your property back as good as you can, less any wear and tear. So it is a really useful document and something that I think a lot of landlords aren't aware of how critical it is. The next thing I would be asking is with routine inspections. How often are they done? What is their process? And just a really random question. Let's say, for example, routine inspections are set up for this coming Thursday and the property manager's sick, and so they have to be cancelled. What is the agency's process if they have to be cancelled, or do they have someone else who can go do it? This is something to think about, that as a tenant who has been notified there's an inspection and then they have cleaned and prepared and then the inspection gets cancelled. Unfortunately, sometimes it does happen, but it is super frustrating for tenants who have gone to a lot of effort to get it ready, only to have to go do that in a week or two and do it all again. So understanding how the agency approaches that will perhaps give you some understanding as to what the experience is like for your tenant. Another thing to think about is the lease renewal process. Asking detailed questions around what is their process. Every agency is different in what they do and how they approach it. Will you be communicated with prior? And what sort of information will you be communicated with? And what is their position on rental increases? What is the agency's process around conversations with the tenant? Or do they just send across a letter and hope the tenant signs? I think there's a lot of different ways that agencies do this, so understanding how your chosen agency works is a good idea. Thinking about where your agency is located and where your property is located, I have a bit of an opinion that properties don't all have to be central to the office. But if your property is located in the south, for example, and your chosen agency is managing all properties in the west, when the south property comes up for rent or when the tenant vacates, it's going to create a lot of additional work and lost time being on the road travelling to that property. So understanding their process for out of area listings and how they will manage that additional workload, because you want to make sure that at those critical times, things aren't being missed because the property manager doesn't have time to deal with them because they're spending additional time on the road. The next thing to think about would be the termination process. Let's say, for example, things have gone really, really wrong and you don't feel as a landlord that it can be salvaged. And unfortunately, this isn't a property business, it is a relationships business. And when things go wrong, landlords will lose trust and you do need to trust your agent. So sometimes things can't be fixed. What is the agent's position when that happens? Are they going to keep you locked into a contract? Are there fees that are applicable? What does that look like if the relationship is damaged beyond repair? An uncomfortable conversation to have about how each property manager or agent responds will give you some insightful clues. There are some other random questions you could throw out. Now, keeping in mind, all of these questions don't need to be asked in one sitting. It doesn't need to feel like a job interview. And you might be able to answer some of these yourself through researching that agent online. They might have this information available on their website, but you don't want to just fire all the questions at them because they'll feel like they're in a job interview, but it should just happen naturally as part of the conversation. But a few other random questions I can think of. Has there been much staff turnover in the last 12 months? That's probably the biggest complaint I hear and have heard for a long time is staff turnover or multiple property managers. And unfortunately, the negative impact that changing property managers has on the landlord and the tenant is definitely one of those pain points for a lot of landlords. So understanding what the agency's turnover has been like would be really helpful. And then thinking through again what the experience is like for your tenant. What happens for any after hours repairs? Do you get a phone call as the landlord, or does the property manager just deal with it? Or is that outsourced to someone else? That's a really useful thing to understand should something catastrophic happen at 2 a.m. in the morning. If you don't want a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning as the landlord, it would be good to have that conversation prior to working with that agency. And understanding what the agency's process is around repairs and maintenance. Keeping in mind, repairs and maintenance, in my opinion, are two separate things. So repairs are something that you have to respond to generally immediately or close enough to it. Maintenance is something that you do to maintain your property. So a repair might be a leaky tap or a broken window. That's a repair. Maintenance might be that we need to replace the silicone in the shower recess. It's not critical. It's not impacting the everyday use of the property. But your agent should be making maintenance recommendations to you in order to maximize your return, reduce your overall running costs and operating costs by maintaining these small items when they're needed, as opposed to you rent your property out, you get it back 10 years later and it's run down because no investment has been put back into the property because the agent hasn't advised you what you should be maintaining. And suddenly you have to do everything, and that's overwhelming and not a fun time. Understanding if your agent even understands the difference between repairs and maintenance, and what does their process look like? Do they just action repairs? Do you get a say in how those repairs are actioned? Do they have an amount of money they can spend without your approval? All of these will be different agency to agency. And so understanding what that looks like would be really useful so that you don't have surprises in the long run. So as you can see, there are many more things to think about other than what are your fees. Choosing a property manager, I truly do believe, can make or break your investing journey. If you get the right one, it will be easy. Yes, you'll have things go wrong. It's not a matter of if, but when. That's people and property. It happens. But when things go wrong, you want to know that your chosen agent, you want to feel trust in them. You want to know what it's going to look like when things go wrong. And ultimately, we are all humans too. Mistakes happen. How will that agency remedy that mistake for you if that's the case? So really going deeper than what are your fees, because not all agents are created equal. And I think for a lot of unhappy landlords I speak to, I really go deep into what has made them want to leave their current agent. And there's a lot of the same questions that I see over and over, but I'm genuinely asking because perhaps it's an expectation issue because the landlord didn't ask enough questions at the start. And then they were disappointed when the agency didn't respond as they thought they would. So certainly not just to ensure that you have the best agent you possibly can, but to ensure that your stress is minimized when things do go wrong and that you are making a super informed decision on the person who is managing your biggest asset. So I hope all of these questions have helped, and hopefully landlords out there are going to go ask many, many more questions before they appoint a property manager. And just another quick point, referrals are always really good if you have someone who is having a great experience, but equally understanding still how that agency works would still be needed, because as much as Sarah might be having a great time with Joe, the property manager, if Joe were to leave, what does that experience look like for you? Still be asking a lot of questions so you know what you're getting, because price is what you pay, value is what you get. So I know that was a lot of information to take on board. And if you've stayed with me till the end of this video, thank you. And if you are furiously scribbling these questions down, don't worry. I do have all of this available in a Word doc that I am happy to share. So you can edit it as you need to. You can type answers and you can use this for your own purposes of researching agencies. And I hope that this has landlords more informed and better understanding what they're getting when they choose an agency, so that landlords are happier overall and ultimately stay course, because property investing is a long game. So you need to have your chosen team by your side to make this as stress-free as possible and to make it just one of those things that you don't need to worry about because you've chosen the right team to support you in your investing journey. So if you would like to receive a copy of that document, you can reach out to me either on my website or you can give me a call and I will put this information in the video. And I also want to acknowledge if you have stuck around for this entire session, 5 stars for you for being an educated, informed investor who is taking this seriously and treating their investment property like a business. We wouldn't hire people to work in our business without doing research, interviews, asking questions. So you certainly shouldn't do the same when you're looking to hire a property manager. Good luck with your search, and if I can be of any help, please don't hesitate to reach out.